include ones that you have told us are especially relevant now. For many years, the Dialogue on Aging public presentation programs have brought together in-person researchers, clinicians, and a range of experts in this field for engaging discussions with community seniors on a wide range of healthy aging topics. Our session today continues to meet these goals, including initiatives to build senior and dementia-friendly communities, and a discussion on a very timely topic, practical tools for positive mental health today. Then today we have a number of mini presentations, and we're very happy to present those. And let's begin with our presenter, Lee, who's going to present a interesting session from the Waterfront, representing the Waterfront Center for Communication and Accessibility. So welcome, Yat.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mary Lou, for that kind introduction. I'm just go ahead and share my screen at the moment. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. My name is Yat. I'm the head of communications and marketing here at Wavefront Center for Communication Accessibility. I myself am deaf and hard of hearing. I wear a bone-anchored hearing aid. I'm thankful to know that we have interpreters here with us today so we can communicate in full accessibility. Wavefront Center for Communication Accessibility is a multi-service registered charity that exists to reduce communication barriers. These communication barriers include for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf-blind, oral deaf, and late deafened as well, and also hard of hearing. So think of us as a under one roof organization where we provide a full range of programs and services. Just last year, we rebranded our name from Western Institute for Deaf and Hard of Hearing to Wavefront Center for Communication Accessibility. You may have known us from our older name. Our rebrand has allowed us to align itself with some of the accessibility acts that are ongoing in Canada and also around the world. We are very deep rooted in our community. We've been around for over 64 years. Some of the services we provide include accessible communication services. These are services to meet the diverse needs of those who are deaf, deaf-blind, hard of hearing, and also our hearing community. Our mission is to make sure that we provide clear and easy to understand communication. So the accessible communication services provide services such as interpreting, captioning, translation, and plain language. During this pandemic, we've seen a huge uptake on interpreting and captioning, and also translation. So these include translation for web pages, for websites, for webinars. These are interpreting that you see today in our webinar today, and also for other online participatory videos. We're also seeing a huge uptake in captioning. All of that we provide here at Wavefront Center. And we are also a nonprofit organization as well. So you'll see that our website, all of our pages include ASL. So you can see Jody Burley on there, our manager of translation. She handles all our ASL programs and also translations. So we're happy to provide that assistance to you and your organization and to your event as well. We also have audiology services. We have 3 hearing clinics in the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. They're located in Vancouver, Mount Pleasant, Vancouver Greaterview, next to the VGH, and also in Tri-Cities in Port Coquitlam. We have over 10 registered audiologists with over master's degree and level and higher. So we are there to support you in terms of hearing assessments, the dispensing of new hearing aids, and we also have a program called the Lend an Ear program, which provides refurbished hearing aids to low-income individuals. We also have counseling services. So we provide deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals an opportunity to stay competitive in the workplace, provide employment opportunity, return back to work opportunity, and we provide employment counseling and seniors outreach to support our community. And this month is actually the National Disability Employment Month. So just before the webinar here today, we had another webinar for the community just about employment programs. We also have the Communication Devices Program. It's located in our Mount Pleasant showroom, where we have wonderful technology for those who, for home alerting, for amplified telephones, for PTYs, alarm clocks. These are very unique, specifically made products for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. That include bed shakers for alarm clocks for those who take off their hearing device at night. If they're afraid they won't be able to wake up, we have alarm clocks that come with bed shakers as well. So what have we been doing quickly during this pandemic? We've been trying to rejig the conversation about accessibility, one of which is the clear face mask. Oftentimes right now we need to wear face masks when we go out, but people don't realize that it's really hard to read lips when you have a surgical mask over your lips. So we've been working with a local organization, Tinkering, to develop these wonderful clear face masks that will be available for ordering next week. We also have clear face shield, as you see from our registered audiologist, Hannah Smith here. Obviously, in sign language, facial expressions can serve as cues for grammar and tone. When your face and lips are hidden, it's oftentimes people will find it really difficult to communicate, not just for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, but I hear it's also the same for many people who have no hearing problems as well. So that's just my quick short presentation about Wavefront Center. My name is Yat. My email is included in here, yat.lee@wavefrontcenter.ca. Feel free to connect with me at any time if you have any questions, if you need to book interpreter, translation, or just want to talk about communication accessibility. I am here for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yat. We had the opportunity, Mary Lou and I, to have a lovely tour at the Wavefront Center, and it was really exciting to see all of the things that you're able to offer in one place now at the new building. At this point, I'd like to open for our audience. If you have any questions, please just put your hand sign up and I'll be able to unmute you. You had a question for the speaker?
Yes, I want to know the address of your organization yet.
Absolutely. Our Mount Pleasant location is in 2005 Quebec Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I had a question for you. If someone wanted to have some hearing testing done now during COVID-19, how would you go about doing that? Is there a long wait?
Currently, there is a little bit of a wait. We are seeing patients are booking for December already and onwards into January. And the reason is because during the pandemic, there's been a lot of that backlog of appointments that have been shifted. Currently, we take really exceptional measures because we're an essential service. We do very adequate screening. We do a full clean of the audiology services in our studios, and also the booths that we do testing, and also all the equipment. With the hearing assessments, it usually takes about 70 to 90 minutes. We have our audiologist provide you with the hearing test, diagnosis, and also analysis. Our current Mount Pleasant location is seeing patients up until December. There is some availability, and we also have locations in Willow and Tri-Cities, and there is some opening, pockets of opening here and there up until the end of 2020.
Wonderful, thank you, Yat. I do have one more question in the chat here, and that is from Nancy, and she asks, what is the best way to facilitate a reluctant hearing aid candidate?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. Oftentimes, there's a stigma tied to hearing loss, and the stigma is usually tied to the fact that, oh, that person might think, you know what, I shouldn't wear a hearing aid because people will think I'm weak, or people will think that, you know, I'm no longer quote unquote mainstream. But that is far from the case. In terms of employability, organizations are 90% more likely to hire someone who have a disability. In addition, people are often very accommodating to people who have different types of disabilities, including hearing loss. Hearing loss actually affects 1 in 10 Canadians, and over 50% affect those who are 65 and older. So usually, you know, I usually talk about my lived experience because, you know, being hard of hearing myself, when I wear my hearing device, I actually hear a lot more. I'm using my Bluetooth clip right now to talk to you guys. Otherwise, I would not be able to. So I often encourage clients to think about the opportunities, being able to hear the leaves rustling again, being able to communicate in group settings, being able to directly hear from the person who is across from you in the conference hall is an exceptional experience. And I usually tell these stories to clients who may be reluctant to come see an audiologist or reluctant to wear hearing aids.
Thank you, Yat. We still have a few questions here. A question from Lynn. Translation services for a website promoting dementia-friendly activities among nonprofit organizations. How soon could that be arranged?
We have translation services, so they can be contacted at cis@wavefrontcenter.ca. We can certainly look into your plans on what your plans are and how your website is integrated. We can work quickly with our translator, Jodie Burley, to have that up for you. So she will have all the pricing and all the accommodation required to move forward.
Great,
Christine,
thank you.
Christine,
Yes,
I'm on now.
Donna has the last question. Go
Thanks,
ahead,
Christine.
Donna.
Thanks, Yat. I have an unusual question. I have a girlfriend who's an amazing teacher, and she has a retinologist problem, huge. She's losing her vision. She doesn't want people to know this. Because of virtual, she's on the computer a lot, telling her there must be something to enlarge her screen. She's looking at 60, 70 pieces of photography, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. She ended up having major headaches and also ended up with phlebitis because of it. So I told her there must be someone, and maybe you're the person. Are you?
That's a great question. We work very closely with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. They're called CNIB. We also have a deaf-blind coordinator, and he uses a screen reader that can magnify your screen, whether it is on your computer or whatnot. I think CNIB would be the best place to start with, because our deaf-blind coordinator works with those who are deaf-blind.
Okay, but you can get that magnifier?
We don't have the magnifiers ourselves outside of the deaf-blind coordinator here himself, but CNIB will be able to help you, or you can email me and I can send you CNIB's contact information.
I will do that because she's willing to pay money, because it's getting very, very hard for her right now. But she wants it to be kept private. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to now turn it over to Barb Lindsay. And Barb, I'm just going to assist you here. There you are, you're in.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much everyone for persevering. I really appreciate it. So Christine, do I have a few minutes?
Just a few moments. And before you go ahead then, Barb, I'm just going to say thank you to Yat for his presentation. We really appreciate that, and the support of Wavefront again for bringing us the interpreters today. Over to you, Barb.
Yeah, thanks so much. Absolutely. Thanks, Christine and Mary Lou. I'm really excited to be here today on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society, and we really want to thank Providence Health for hosting this incredible series and for providing us the opportunity to hear from researchers like today and the speakers that we're about to hear. There's about 70,000 people with dementia in BC, and we know that that number is growing. And the Alzheimer's Society has a vision to have a world without Alzheimer's, and that world begins, of course, with a province where people with dementia are acknowledged, where they're supported, included, where they feel they truly belong, and that's a dementia-friendly province. And there's so many things that the Alzheimer's Society does to try and connect to families and to support families to have the confidence and skills to live well with dementia. And so this feels exciting for us to be able to share with you, Providence Health, and to learn from these great researchers. So thanks so much, Christine. So should I go ahead now and introduce our next speaker?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really excited to tell you about our next speakers. That's Avery Milne and Sana Aziz. They are, both of them work in the team that I work with, at the Advocacy and Education team at the Alzheimer's Society of BC, and they're going to talk a little bit about how the Society is working to create a dementia-friendly communities in our province. Thanks, Avery, and thanks, Sana.
Hi, wonderful.
Hi.
Thank you for the introduction, Barbara. So hi, everyone. I'm Avery, the Provincial Coordinator for Knowledge Mobilization here at the Alzheimer's Society of BC. And today I've brought along my colleague, Sana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sana, and I'm the Provincial Coordinator for Dementia Friendly Communities and a colleague of Avery's. Thank you for having me here today.
So if you were with us for previous sessions, we learned about what dementia is and some more information about research around dementia. Today, we're going to very briefly talk about another aspect of dementia, and that is the stigma associated with dementia, as well as the work that we're doing at the Society to create dementia-friendly communities. So stigma is one of the biggest barriers for people living with dementia to live fully with dignity and respect. Stigma is defined as any negative attitude or discriminatory behavior against people living with dementia. And the unfortunate reality is anyone living with dementia can experience this stigma. Even though half of Canadians are living with dementia, many feel excluded, ignored, and treated differently for something beyond their control. You might be surprised to hear that a recent Leger study found that 1 in 4 Canadians believe that their family and friends would avoid them if they were to be diagnosed with dementia. And only 5% of Canadians said that they would learn more about dementia if a family member, friend, or coworker were to be diagnosed. So we can all play a role in reducing the societal impact of stigma through care and inclusion, as well as building dementia-friendly societies. So a dementia-friendly community focuses on the inclusion of people living with dementia and the reduction of this stigma that I mentioned earlier. We can define dementia-friendly communities by their social characteristics. So for example, this could be that city staff are dementia educated and are able to recognize and communicate effectively with a person living with dementia. We can also look at physical characteristics of a dementia-friendly community. So for some examples, this could be clear and legible signage that's placed right at eye level, well-kept streets, and easy-to-use street furniture that's in styles that's familiar to people. These social and physical attributes can help support people living with dementia by reducing their anxiety, stigma, or frustration. Ideally, each community member is educated about dementia and knows that a person living with dementia may sometimes experience the world differently. And our ultimate goal at the Society is that people with dementia feel supported by individuals, businesses, and their local governments. I will now pass it over to my colleague Sana, who will talk a little bit more about what the Society does and what our approach is to dementia-friendly communities. Over to you, Sana.
Thank you for the overview, Avery. The Society's Dementia-Friendly Communities Initiative enables local governments, the professional sector, community groups, and the general public to become dementia-friendly. By providing tools and education, and by forging strategic partnerships, the Society is helping to build communities that value, include, and respect people living with dementia. The Society's approach to dementia-friendly communities is focused on three main pillars: people, practice, and policy. The first pillar of people is focused on providing education, information on topics such as what is dementia, myths, communication strategies, common behaviors, etc., to individuals so they are better equipped to be supportive and inclusive of people living with dementia in their communities. We provide Dementia Friends education to various sectors across the province. We also provide sector-specific training for staff in areas of recreation, transit, library, first responders groups, faith-based organizations, to name a few. The second pillar of practice ensures professional groups have access to resources and information to respond to the needs of clients affected by dementia through sector-specific toolkits. For example, we have the series of Making Your Workplace Dementia-Friendly guides, specifically designed for this finance, housing, legal, and recreation sectors, as well as some upcoming guides for the library and retail industry. This third pillar of policy is a central element of the Dementia Friendly Communities Initiative as we work with local governments across our province. To date, we have supported approximately 15 communities, with 2 communities in progress, as they create and implement dementia-friendly action plans or other dementia-friendly projects as per their municipal goals. With support of our municipal and service sector partners, we hope to continue spreading awareness and providing tools for becoming a dementia-friendly province. We need to make British Columbia, Canada, and the whole world a safe and inclusive space for every single person living with dementia. There's a lot you can do to eliminate stigma and empower people affected by dementia. A great example of this inclusion is the Noteworthy Singers initiative that we will hear more about shortly. Join us in challenging stigma by demonstrating compassion and understanding to help people living with dementia feel safe and included. Spread the word and start conversations to help people see dementia differently. We encourage you to take the time to explore the links that will be shared with you after this presentation today. On behalf of Avery and myself, we thank you for having us today and for being a wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you so much, Avery. You know, if just to follow on Christine's note, do call the First Link Dementia Helpline. It's 1-800-936-6033. For any questions, tell us your stories, your experiences. Stigma is such a common experience, and you don't need to feel alone. Please call the Dementia Helpline. We're always ready to hear from you. So thanks, Avery and Sana. So now we'd like to introduce our first set of guest speakers for today's session. So today we're joined by Cindy Bouvet from the Geriatric Mental Health Clinician from the North Shore Older Adult Mental Health Team. So Cindy's going to be presenting on, as Sana said, on the Noteworthy Singers, building strong senior and dementia-friendly communities through fun, intergenerational experiences. Cindy, this is an exciting topic and we're interested to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to present about the Noteworthy Singers. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. And what a great segue into this program, because this program, the Noteworthy Singers, is a choir for people with dementia, their family caregivers, and young people and high school students. And our one of the goals in developing the choir is to participate in developing senior and dementia-friendly communities, and doing this through intergenerational programming. So much of the presentation will be on the Noteworthy Singers, but also at the end, I'm hoping to have time to segue into some of your ideas on developing programs to create supportive communities that don't have stigma and that are accepting, and strong communities for seniors and for people living with dementia. Okay, so the Noteworthy Singers is a partnership between Parkgate Community Services Society, and in particular with Pam Havens, who was going to present today, but unfortunately at the last minute she had to pull out. And she's in charge of dementia services at Parkgate Community Services Society. It's a partnership with Ecole Windsor and their music director there, and myself, I'm a clinician on the North Shore Older Adult Mental Health team. So why did we want to develop a choir? We want to create senior and dementia-friendly communities. As Barb mentioned, there's over 70,000 people in BC living with a dementia, and that number is only going to go up in years. And we're in the baby boom years for sure, and that number is only going to go up. As Sana and Avery spoke about, is that people living with dementia and their families have a lot of stigma, and communities have a lot of stigma around dementia. Also, caregivers have a lot of stress. And so one of the reasons we wanted to develop this choir was to offer caregiver support. And so in order to create supportive and senior and dementia-friendly communities, what we need to do is we must provide creative opportunities for people to engage with each other. And also, one way to ensure that we don't have stigma moving forward is to engage youth. And often youth are given kind of a bad rap. And honestly, there's a lot of great young people out there. So we decided that we would combine youth with seniors to create meaningful connections across and among the generations. The whole goal of it is to improve people's quality of life, right? And so we use music as a tool to do that. Singing and music. Music, as we all know, is international language, and lots of songs across the generations can be familiar to both. And so music, we wanted to move forward with music. And I personally was inspired by the work of Dr. Deborah Sheets. You may have heard of Voices in Motion choirs, which she started out of University of Victoria. And she and her colleagues started 6 choirs, 3 in residential care and 3 in the community. And she did very rigorous research with that. And I can't go into all her findings, but I will share some of the crossover with what we experienced. We didn't have the opportunity yet to do research with Dr. Sheets, but we do hope to in the future, partly because of COVID and other factors. So I'll cross over where our observations they aligned with what she found. So who and what? So already shared that it's people living with dementia and their care partners, mostly husbands and wives. They were high school students from Windsor High School. They were grade 10, 11, and 12. And I have to say, they were awesome youth, just awesome. We practiced on a Friday afternoon at 3:30, 4 o'clock, 3:45, I think, for an hour and a half. And those youth stayed. They came in on professional days. and they were so committed. We had 90-minute rehearsals for 7 weeks. I forgot to mention that we started the pilot project for the Noteworthy Singers in the fall of 2019. We had four rehearsals to get together and just kind of test the waters and to see how people liked it. People loved it. And so we started in January, and we had 6 rehearsals and one dress rehearsal. So at one dress rehearsal, and then we had a concert on March the 5th. Yeah. There's somebody whose microphone is not muted. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So we had a concert on March the 5th, and it was a huge success, and I'll tell you about the concert when we get to that part of the slide. One of the main things that we did was we had, in order to promote the seniors getting to know the students and vice versa, and the caregivers getting to know each other, we had a 30-minute socialization period in the middle of the concert. The middle of the rehearsal. And that was pivotal in terms of developing relationship and also in terms of reducing stigma. Okay, and what we did at that time was we asked 2 open-ended questions for the groups to go and then talk with each other. So for example, we asked, what was a leisure activity that you did when you were in high school? What subjects did you like in high school? What was an embarrassing moment? What kind of music do you like? What kind of music did you like? And those were key in the program. So I want to introduce you to Mr. Adam Kozak, who is our very fantastic conductor, very talented musician, singer in the opera, and very knowledgeable about technology. And he brought this program where people learned the music, practiced the music from on screen. And in a moment, we'll show you a video, and you'll see how the rehearsal went. Basically, it's karaoke on steroids, where the ball bounces along on each of the parts. And just note that our group was not a sing-along, although there's great value in sing-along. It was a choir where we had 4-part harmony. People could choose whichever group they wanted to be in, whichever part they wanted to be in, and they could change if they wanted. We weren't strict on it. But the idea was that people would learn and that they would grow with it. And there was that level of challenge. And that was really, really good. So Adam jumped on being our director. Pam and I approached him the summer of 2019, and he jumped on our project for 2 reasons. 1, he has personal connection to dementia, and 2, he really wanted to provide opportunities for the students to give back. I remember him saying that, and to enhance the community through the power of music. So Christine, if you could put the video on. Okay, so I'm ready to go again. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. So that was an example of a rehearsal, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. So now I'm going to go over what the impact was on the persons living with dementia, the caregivers and all care partners, and also the students. Everyone, I have to say, everyone experienced joy. I could have put it in every slide. What was interesting with the people with dementia and with the caregivers is that they came in the first day, they weren't quite sure what was going on. They didn't know they were going to be asked to be sing. And very soon everybody was singing and laughing and having lots and lots of fun. And people bloomed and they became more confident. So the people with dementia, as we know, people with dementia can lose language over time. And singing gives, even for people with language, an opportunity, gives all of us opportunity for self-expression. And singing is not dependent on cognition and memory. Singing comes from the right side of the brain, the language from the left side of the brain, of course. And there was this one lady, Mrs. F, I'll call her. She had no language left at all, like could say one word at the most. But you put on Country Roads and she could sing all of the music, just all of it, because it sits in a different part of the brain than where the loss is from. So she was able to really express herself and her speech improved. Pam knew her and she said her speech totally improved. So it provided the opportunity to have new friends, for sure. This next story talks about the way these gentlemen met. So the one rehearsal, one of the young students, he leaned in to give the note to Mr. O, because Mr. O was not quite finding the note. And Mr. O, in turn, leaned in to Mr. W. And Mr. W later, Mr. W, let me just tell you, was very shy, very reserved, very soft-spoken man. He said he wanted to thank Mr. O because Mr. O had he had taught him how to sing. Mr. O then in turn thanked the student for giving him the note. And that interaction between those two older men, both of whom had dementia, Mr. O early stage, Mr. W mid-stage dementia at that time, they formed a bond that was unbelievable. They looked for each other each session and they supported each other each session. And Mr. W, as a result of being in the choir, he had a stronger sense of himself. He was more articulate, more talkative, absolutely. And he had developed a new leisure identity. He had developed an identity as a singer, for sure. We talked about that we provided opportunity for new learning and for challenge. Absolutely, people learned in the group. And they provided new learning. And what Dr. Sheets found was that people in their choirs, they did cognitive screening, and being in the choir was able to slow down the decline. The Folstein the mini mental exam that they gave, they slowed down the decline in people. So people were able to do new learning in our group, and I think if we went for longer and had done some testing, we may have found that as well. And people developed a sense of belonging. They were proud to be in the Noteworthy Singers. Mr. O, who I told you about, he went and he had this button designed, and I don't think you can probably see what it says, but it says Noteworthy Singers. We gave one to everybody, all the volunteers and everybody, and people wore them and had them on their clothing and on their purses and so on. And this was particularly meaningful in a way because Mr. O is a younger fellow. He has dementia, and he was having a hard time acknowledging it and feeling the stigma that Sana and Avery talked about. And this was his way, I think, of beginning to accept it. Okay, so moving on to impact on care partners. It was really profound, I think. Care partners, as we all know, experience a great deal of distress. And this singing opportunity and community opportunity gave them a chance to do leisure together, to have fun together, to laugh together, to have something to talk about when they went home. Really, really important. It also gave them the opportunity to develop supportive relationships with other caregivers. I've worked with caregivers for a long time, and people often feel that they're very alone, that they are the only ones going through this. But you know, when they can talk to other people who are in similar situations, so it provided them that opportunity, particularly at the break, they could connect. And also they connected outside of the program as well. A few people did that. And just as important, they had the opportunity to develop real relationship with the youth. This picture here is actually Mrs. W. and a young student, and they were both very fine singers, and they did a duet, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, and it was wonderful to see the respect and the care and the laughter that they had, both when they were singing and when they were not singing. It gave opportunity for respite within the program. Mr. W was very unsteady on his feet, and he was going up the stairs one day, and one of the volunteers went to help him, and she went to help, and I stopped her and I said, you don't have to do it all. And you could see that she visibly relaxed. The decreased level of caregiver stress, although we didn't actually formally assess it, it definitely decreased. We could see that people were less stressed. The caregivers were way less stressed when they, towards the end of the program, or even just partway through, after 1 or 2 rehearsals. Absolutely. And Dr. Sheets definitely found a decreased level of caregiver stress, and also a decreased risk of depression by participating in the Voices in Motion choirs. Okay, then the students. Here we have a lovely picture of the students, one of the students getting to know one of the seniors who has dementia, just one of the seniors. And, you know, I already spoke about the break and the questions, and that was really a meaningful way for them to develop a relationship. And they got to learn about real life history. Mr. W shared a story about walking ahead of a bus in front of the snow in a big snowstorm. And I remember looking at the kids, the youth, and they were so surprised by this. And, you know, they really got to learn. They became ambassadors not only for the school, but also they became ambassadors for the choir. One of the students at the concert gave an extremely eloquent speech, and the concert was all of the school choirs, of which there were 6, and the Noteworthy Singers was one of them. And she said, her words were, "I couldn't be more proud than to be," this just makes me tear up, than to be a member of the Noteworthy Singers. So they were very proud. And, you know, what they saw in the seniors, all of the seniors, is that they didn't see the dementia, they saw people. Absolutely, just they see people for where they are at, and also for their history, because we got them to get to know each other, and that reduces stigma. So let's move on to the concert, Christine, the video. Okay, so that was just a small piece of the concert. Just so you know, there were over 200 people in the room. The audience they absolutely loved it. In fact, Mr. W, the fellow who was so shy, he said to Pam right after, "We got a standing O." And honestly, it just makes me tear up again. There was not a dry eye in the place. The audience, we sang 2 songs only. Each choir sang 2 songs. And the audience was very emotionally moved, because they couldn't tell who had dementia and who didn't. And there was one very young woman in there with dementia, and they would have had no idea no idea. And what they saw was and even if they did, it doesn't matter, because what they see is they see people's abilities. They see what they accomplished. They saw the pride and the skill with which they performed, and that reduces the stigma. The parents were ecstatic. They absolutely wanted their kids to be involved again. And yeah, they loved it. It was a huge success. And we also had, earlier on, we had, one of the impacts on the community was we had the North Shore News come, and Ben, who was the writer, did a great job on giving a very positive spin on choir connecting generations through song and working with people with memory loss. He did a really great job. Another impact on the community is just this last week, the report on Parliament came out, and report to Parliament on the National Strategy on Aging, and both Voices and Motion and the Noteworthy Singers have been made mention. And so if anybody here is on, from the Noteworthy Singers, and you may be, I don't know, I think you can be very proud of that. And we were also invited to sing at the geriatric conference, by Dr. Harrigan, and to join Dr. Deborah Sheets. And then COVID happened. We gave our concert, we were supposed to go and present, and then COVID happened. And it's like, oh heavens. So of course, everything stopped. Now, of course, we're not able to continue. But one of the things that has continued in terms of intergenerational music and like a senior and dementia-friendly group is Voices in Motion have continued on online, and they have a sing-along and also a choir. And a sing-along and a choir, and actually one of our members is in that young woman. She is in that choir. She was in the sing-along, and now she's in the choir. So obviously we're not able to meet in person. And so moving forward, in addition to doing some online singing, and I believe that there is movement to get some funding, to do some research, to continue that kind of thing. But in addition to that, there's other programs that we can do that can be dementia and senior friendly. Maybe not in person, but maybe through video or YouTube or letter writing, and the whole goal is to increase the quality of life of seniors and people living with dementia. So at this point, I'm not quite sure how much time we have, Christine. I'm just looking. We've got 5 minutes. So maybe to open it to questions, but also to ideas, and I can certainly answer questions after in the chat box. But if there's any questions or comments and ideas for moving forward to create senior and dementia-friendly communities in these COVID times. Through intergenerational experiences, like with younger people or people of other, doesn't necessarily have to be young people, but people of other generations. So, okay, so maybe while those are coming in, Christine, I can present some ideas. One of the things that I found recently, I'm just going to go to the next slide, because there's actually a group of some young people who have started letters against isolation. It was a university student and her sister who's in high school, and they're starting letters. They started letters against isolation. So those are handwritten letters that you send to, I'm not sure if it's a central place or directly to care centers, and they're given to seniors. You keep your who you are anonymous, but you send nice letters about what you're doing in life and what's happening, and letters of encouragement to and this is under the Minister of Isolation. No, it isn't under the Minister of Isolation. There is a Minister of Isolation in England, but this, and it happens in Canada, US, UK, and Australia. Yeah. So any questions?
So we have a comment. Lynn
Okay.
writes that the Westside Seniors Hub is just about to publish a website that features dementia-friendly inclusive activities that invite community members to participate. Would love to feature your presentation.
Oh, okay. Wow, thank you. Maybe Lynn, you could email me. I have my contact information in the next slide. So you could email me and we could connect that way.
Wonderful. And
Okay.
so that's just a sign that networking can happen even virtually.
Right.
We have a question here from Dr. Beatty. Do you include the intergenerational help with the online options that people
Yes.
can work with?
Yes, I believe so. Erica Fairberg is the director of that program. Sorry, she's the music director of that program, and I believe that it is intergenerational. I believe that the choir is intergenerational. And if they don't have as many youth as they want yet, I'm sure that they are working, that they're definitely working on it. And also, Dr. Beatty, if you wanted to email me, I could put you in contact with Erica.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy. I think we're running a little bit short on time here.
Thank you, Christine.
Hi. Hi, Cindy, thank you so much. That was
You're
really
welcome.
that was really lovely. It was lovely to hear you experiencing the joy through the power of music, that international language you spoke of. So congratulations to you and the choir. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I've known I've had your support, so thank you.
That's great, Cindy. So now we're going to get ready for Dr. Blackburn, who will be speaking exactly at 2 o'clock.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barb. And we'll see you all back in a couple of minutes.
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Blackburn. We're so
Hello.
excited that you're coming to speak with us this afternoon. And so I'll just let everyone know that Dr. Blackburn, that you're a clinical assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry at the Faculty of Medicine at UBC, and that you're a geriatric psychiatrist on the older adult mental health team here in Vancouver at the Vancouver Coastal Health. And I think really exciting for us is that you're a member of the Fountain of Health National Speakers Bureau. And the Fountain of Health is a group of leading academics and clinicians who are trying to build a national movement for optimal aging in Canada. So we're really looking forward to your discussion, the Fountain of Health, practical tools for positive mental health. And just for the audience, if you have any questions for Dr. Blackburn, just put them in the chat box, and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So Dr. Blackburn, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, friends. Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. I love talking about this topic, and I'm so thrilled to be able to meet with so many of you through this new medium. I do have to apologize. This whole virtual presentation thing is still a little new for all of us. We're kind of getting a little bit more used to it, but could be a couple headaches. I'll do my best. We'll see where things go. I know we have wonderful tech support. I want to really thank, Providence Health, the Alzheimer Society, all the sponsors for the opportunity to give this talk. It's so wonderful to be able to continue doing, this kind of work, even in the face of this COVID pandemic. And of course, thank you all again so much for being here. So we're going to spend about an hour and we're going to talk about the Fountain of Health. I am going to take you on a whirlwind going through some of the science behind this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fountain of Health intervention itself, but ultimately, there's really only 5 little things that I kind of want you to remember from this talk. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you will consider making a very small change in your life in some way connected to one of these 5 things that we know have some of the strongest science behind them in terms of helping you age the best that you can, to be as successful as possible. The rest of it's all fluff, guys, ultimately. And you know what? It's important fluff. It's fluff that I like. I hope you pay attention to it. But ultimately, it's the 5 things that we're going to get at. So again, couple acknowledgements. These are some of my mentors, some of the founders of FOH, helped a lot with these slides. A lot of people I want to thank here, in addition, again, to the sponsors for the conference today. So before we start, I need to give you a pretty big caveat, okay? I am very optimistic. And this talk is incredibly positive. It's nauseatingly positive, okay? So if you happen to be on the more pessimist, sort of realist kind of side of life, it might be a little bit much for you, and I'm sorry. Sorry if it is, you've been warned. Except that actually I'm kind of not sorry, to be honest with you, because what I'm hoping you're gonna pick up from this is that optimism, gratitude, and positivity are things that you can learn, and they're things that can actually help you in living a better life. So let's see if I can convince you. So part one, we're going to talk a bit about the science of aging well. And to do that, I'm going to start by taking you through kind of a brief history of humanity. So thinking about longevity, if we were living in prehistoric times, our life expectancy would be about 35 years. Fast forward to the 20th century, 1900, we've made some gains. We're up to 48 years, not too bad, right? But what's kind of amazing is in basically the 117 years since then, we've gone from 48 to 83 years. That's a blink of the eye in the grand scheme of human and terrestrial history, right? And yet we've almost doubled longevity. It's amazing. And you know, it kind of raises this natural question. How much of this is your biology? How much of this is genetic? You know, I get into this little argument sometimes with my father-in-law, who I care about very much, but is again a little bit more on that pessimistic side of life. And one thing he'll say to me is, Paul, you know, I'm in my 70s, my dad died in his 60s, my grandparents passed away in their 60s. I'm living on borrowed time. I don't see the point in using a seatbelt. I don't see the point in exercising or eating well. And it's a pretty negative perspective. And I have to be that kind of smart aleck son-in-law who tells him that actually only about 25% of his longevity is determined by his genes. Just 25%. Think about that, what that means. That means that 75% has to do with your lifestyle, has to do with your experiences in the world, is potentially changeable, maybe modifiable. It's very empowering, isn't it? So we have a lot more control over our length of life sometimes than we think we do. And so some of you may start to think now, though, he's talking about longevity. He's talking about living longer. And do you think maybe there's an ingredient that's missing here in what I'm talking about? I think there probably is, right? You know, one of the problems with Western medicine is we have been so obsessed with length of life. But length of life itself doesn't really capture quality of life, does it? Do you really want to live a longer life that's not a better life? Not necessarily. You know, when I went into medicine, I certainly didn't want to be just prolonging life. I wanted to help people live better lives. And to that end, you know, I came across this idea, kind of positive psychology, and we'll go into positive psychology a little bit in a minute, but I want to read this quote to you that I really love about this. It's from Atul Gawande, a really prolific author in this area, and he says, "We've been wrong about what our job is in medicine. We think our job is to ensure health and survival, but really, it's larger than that. It's to enable well-being. And well-being is about the reasons one wishes to be alive. And those reasons matter not just at the end of life or when debility comes, but all along the way, don't they?" So what's positive psychiatry, positive psychology? How does that kind of apply to this? Well, positive psychiatry is basically the idea that we should not simply be aiming for symptom relief in folks, but we should be trying to help our clients to actually thrive. So for me as a geriatric psychiatrist, that means I want to try to help people to age well, and I do it by trying to enhance positive psychological traits: optimism, resilience, social engagement, things like that. You know, give you some more definitions. If you pull up a Wikipedia article on positive psychology, the quote you're going to get is the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. Another way I really like to talk about this, so Marty Seligman is a psychologist and actually one of the original inspirations for me in getting interested in this topic and in health promotion generally. I saw a great talk from him a few years ago. And again, he talks about this idea that in mental health, we often work on taking people from -10 to 0. We treat depression, we treat anxiety, we treat schizophrenia, we support people through dementia, but we don't necessarily do as much to actually help them build well-being after that point. Positive psychology or positive psychiatry, either term you want to use, takes people from 0 to 10. This is about going further beyond that. Now, one of the ways that we do this is through talking a bit about people's mindsets. And I want to give you an example of how powerful mindsets are for people. So I'm going to take you through the cognitive behavioral therapy model of thinking. Okay, this is a model a lot of therapists and psychiatrists use to think about how depression forms in people and other kind of negative thinking patterns. So imagine you're walking down the street. You know, COVID is over, thank goodness, and you've been cooped up inside, and you said to yourself, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get some exercise, I'm going to do an aquafit class, I'm going to do something like that. You're walking down the street, and across the street, you see somebody who you recognize, and you wave at them, and you're waving, and they don't respond. They just walk by. What kind of thoughts are going to go through your head when that happens? You might think to yourself, oh, they just ignored me. Do they not like me? Am I not likable? What's the point? You know, why am I going out? Why am I even doing this? Why am I trying to exercise? I might as well just stay inside. You know, I look like an idiot. People are judging me because I'm just waving, you know, and I look strange. And what are your emotions going to be? Well, you're going to feel pretty sad, I think, if you start having those kinds of thoughts, aren't you? Maybe you'll be a little angry, a little embarrassed, and maybe you'll just say to yourself, forget it. I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm not going to go to aquafit. I'm going home. And you go home and you sit on your couch and you start to think to yourself, well, there it is again. I failed at doing this. I can never seem to get going for exercising. I guess I'm just a failure. And you might start to feel more sad. And what you can see, I'm painting a very depressing picture here, is this negative spiral that can happen to people. And this is one of the ways we think about depression in mental health. These negative thought patterns, these cognitive distortions are what we call them. The wonderful thing about this is we can flip this thing upside down and use these same principles to help people to live better lives and to get out of depression. And so say you're walking down the street and you catch those negative thoughts about the person across the street, but then you say to yourself, whoa, wait a minute. Did they ignore me or did they just not see me? Are they having a bad day? Is that what's going on here? Maybe I should call them. And you know, maybe you'll feel a little better when you have those more rational thoughts, and maybe you will go out to the gym. And so the way we think about things is incredibly powerful. Now, I want to talk more about the power of mindsets with a couple more examples. So the 4-minute mile, this was supposed to be unbreakable. Roger Bannister, well, he thought otherwise. And in May of 1954, he broke that record. He spent months training, analyzing his running. And this, folks, was a game changer for the whole field. You know, after this, lots of people were breaking that barrier because he broke through that whole mindset that it was unbreakable. And this is a great example from Christine Podesky. She's a prominent cognitive behavioral therapist, and she uses it to demonstrate again how powerful our thoughts and attitudes can be with regard to our actions. So let's talk about some other frameworks here. So many of you might recognize this. This is a dramatic sculpture by Louise Bourgeois. It's in front of the National Art Gallery in Ottawa. Now, there are also copies in in London, Tokyo, Spain, South Korea, and in Qatar. And what I kind of love about this is that Louise Bourgeois was 88 when she made this thing. Pretty incredible accomplishment, isn't it? It sold for $3.2 million in 2005. Not too bad, right? 2007, Robert Malchon, at the age of 105, sets a new record. He bikes 22 kilometers in 1 hour at the National Velodrome in France. Mr. Malchon only started competitive cycling at the age of 68. Can you imagine that? Now, these, I guess, are some examples that I'm giving to you because I'm trying to challenge stereotypes that we have about older individuals. And I'm trying to help people see the breadth of possibility that can exist out there. You know, the Japanese have this nice term, it's wabi-sabi, and it's for the appreciation and intrinsic value of things that have grown old or worn with time. So as Barbara Bloom puts it, when the Japanese mend broken objects, they aggrandize the damage by filling the cracks with gold because they believe that when something has suffered damage and has a history, it becomes more beautiful. Isn't that a wonderful image? Appreciating the adversity that something has gone through. And it's quite different from our culture's obsession with youth and newness. There are a lot of negative views about aging out there. There are a lot of stereotypes about aging. And if we're not careful, these are things that can become self-fulfilling prophecies. It goes back to the CBT, cognitive behavioral principles, that I was talking about earlier. If you have these thoughts that nothing's going to make a difference in your aging, why would you change your actions? Why would you do anything else? So let's talk a bit about resiliency. You know, aging isn't for wimps. There are losses. There can be disease. We can lose family. Negative things happen in life that we don't necessarily have control over. How do we stay resilient in the face of those things? What are the things that are involved in resiliency against those losses? What is resiliency anyways? I mean, roughly speaking, I'd say it's the ability to rebound in the face of adversity, put simply. And it's essentially made up of these two ingredients. So you have cognitive flexibility. This is the ability to focus on what is changeable in challenging situations. This is about being able to shift focus away from rumination about what we can't change and to stay present in the moment. And the second ingredient is optimism. And I'm not talking about kind of Pollyanna, rose-colored glasses variety, but more like this willingness to see beyond problems and to look for what is good in ourselves and in others, for what is meaningful, even in very difficult situations. Let's give you an example of resilience. This right here is a Matisse. It's one of his brilliant and vibrant cutouts. So by his early 80s, Matisse was suffering. He'd had a heart attack, he had a lung disorder, he had gastrointestinal problems. All of this left him largely confined to a wheelchair. But this loss of physical energy leads to this new burst of creative energy that enabled him to reroute his passion for color from canvas onto cutouts. What's amazing is even when he's essentially bedbound, he keeps working. He takes these poles, he puts charcoal on the poles and starts doing art on his ceiling. I'd love to buy that house, by the way, to be decorated by Matisse. But anyway, so what is this? This is cognitive flexibility. You know, he's found an alternative way to create art, even in the face of his losses. And it's optimism. It's resilience, isn't it? And, you know, a key point to remember here is resilience. Well, you know, it's a bit like physical fitness. It's something you can exercise. It's something you can grow over time. It's not necessarily a trait that you're born with. And it's something that can help to regulate some of the negative impacts that we face in life from chronic stress. And my goodness, I think we're under a lot of stress right now, aren't we? The COVID pandemic has been incredibly difficult for folks. We have had our work, our finances, our social lives, everything kind of blown up because of this. It's very stressful. And so how do we build resiliency to something like COVID? Well, you know, human beings often try to get through stress by muscling through. You hang on tight and you let go of your self-care. And it works for short-term stresses, but it doesn't work so well for long-term things that are going on and on and on. At that point, you actually need that self-care to support you to get through this. And I think COVID-19 has again really emphasized to us that we need kind of a better approach to manage long-term stresses. So again, you know, you have this kind of stress response, this muscle through, or you have more of this relaxation response. And so again, the question would be, what's our psychological PPE in the face of this? You know, how can we promote our well-being in the face of COVID-19? Well, let me talk a bit about FOH, about the Fountain of Health. So in Fountain of Health, we draw on these 5 core scientifically backed up areas that can be helpful in building positive health behaviors and attitudes for aging. I think that engaging in these things can also be helpful in building resiliency during COVID and in getting through what we're all going through right now. So what are they? Well, they're changing how we think about aging, staying socially connected, keeping physically active, engaging in lifelong learning, and taking care of our mental health. Okay, what's the science behind this? Why am I telling you that these 5 things are good? Let's go through this a little bit. So I'm gonna ask you a question. What do you think will lead to the longest life? Is it having a low weight, a low blood pressure, and a low cholesterol? Is it being a non-smoker or someone who exercises? Is it simply thinking that you've aged well? Well, this is neat. This comes out of a study done at Yale. And the authors took 660 people over 50, and they followed them for a couple decades, for like 23 years, kept checking in with these folks as they aged for 23 years after the age of 50. And what they found is that if a participant had a low blood pressure, low cholesterol, low weight at the beginning of the study, they tended to live 1 to 3 years longer than those who didn't. It was pretty good, right? A 1 to 3 year life bonus. Now, if you were a non-smoker or you tended to exercise at the beginning of this study, you gained between 1 to 4 years. Again, not bad, right? A few extra years. Now, what's amazing is if at the age of 50, when you started this study, you had positive self-perceptions of aging, you felt aging was okay, you felt you'd aged well, your longevity was increased by 7.5 years. 7.5 years simply because you thought that you'd aged well. It's incredible. Doesn't it really show the power of the mind and of perspective here? Let me give you another example here. So let's talk about healthy behavior. So this is coming from a German study where over a 6-year period, the authors looked at about 4,000 middle-aged and older-aged adults. And again, looking at these folks, what they found is that people who had more positive views on aging, again, they walked more, and they tended to increase their walking over time. What's neat here too is it wasn't even really connected to actual objective health, okay? So even people who were more frail, who had significant health issues, if they had the positive views on aging, they walked more. It's neat, right? Just thinking positively about aging makes a difference in how you take care of yourself. Now, you might think again that this is intrinsic, that people are born optimistic, that there's no hope, kind of, if you're negative in your outlook or more pessimistic. So this is a neat study. Again, same authors from Germany. The outcome of the study, now they took like a large group of folks and they wanted to see what kinds of interventions, what kinds of things they could do that would make these folks exercise more often. So they randomized into 4 different groups. So one of the groups was a passive control. They didn't give them any instructions and they just waited to see how much exercise they do. Another group was randomized to doing some volunteer work. Another group was given a personal trainer, basically some planning for physical activity. And the 4th group went through a 3-hour views on aging lecture. Now, what do you think happens here? You could probably predict what I'm going to say based on how I've been talking to you up to now. The group who had a 3-hour lecture on aging positively was the only group out of all 4 of these to start exercising more often. All it took was 3 hours. 3 hours of education on thinking more positively about aging. That's incredible. It really is mind over matter in a lot of ways, isn't it? So let's give some more examples of things. Let's look at the negative side of this. So it's another neat study that shows how kind of age stereotypes, which are internalized earlier in life, can actually be quite far-reaching in people's health. Don't worry about trying to read my little slide here. I'll give you kind of the core details. This is a study looking at 440 people at age 49 or younger at the beginning. And again, the scientists followed these guys for 40 years. So kept checking in with them for 40 years after starting the study. What they found is that younger individuals at the start of the study who had more negative age stereotypes were actually significantly more likely to experience a cardiovascular event over the next 38 years after adjusting for a lot of other variables. So if you had negative age stereotypes at the beginning of the study, you were more likely to have a heart attack, a stroke, a clot, something like that. It's incredible. Again, all just based on negative biases. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you that some element of optimism and positive views on aging is important in our well-being. Let's talk about exercise now. We know exercise is helpful for heart disease, for high blood pressure, diabetes, and arthritis, but I mean, what are some of the other things that can help? Well, it turns out that it's probably the best promoter of neuroplasticity across the lifespan that we have. What's neuroplasticity? It's a fancy word. Basically refers to growing new connections between brain cells or even gaining brain cells. Think of it basically as brain growth and development. Now, up into kind of the 90s, we used to think this didn't happen. We used to think that what you started with was it, right? But now we know that's not really the case. You actually can continue developing and growing things. And exercise is like fertilizer for the brain with regard to this. Now, there are ideal amounts, but what's kind of lovely about this, folks, is there's also studies showing that honestly, anything is better than nothing. It kind of goes up on an upward scale, right? Getting up, walking to the mailbox, walking around your house during the 6 o'clock news, commercials, anything is better than nothing, which is wonderful, right? Even those little tiny things you can do can actually maybe help making a difference. You know, we have this whole idea that sitting is kind of the new smoking now, right? And it's kind of for a reason, because exercise actually has a lot of really good science behind it. So a couple studies here: regular moderate exercise, 60 minutes 3 times a week, improved thinking, cognitive function in older adults. Another neat study: regular physical activity may have reduced risk of dementia by up to 30%. Now, I think that number may be a little high if you look at some of the other science, but we do think it has a benefit for reducing risk of dementia. What else does it do? Well, it improves mood. And this is borne out pretty well, again, in the science. You know, we have a Cochrane review. These are kind of the really big scientific reviews that take all the data and do a really solid analysis to give us a direction on how we should treat patients and what we should do. And it shows that exercise is pretty helpful for mood regulation. It's to the point where it's actually a first-line CANMAT recommendation for the treatment of depression. What does that mean? Well, CANMAT is the guideline that Canadian psychiatrists and doctors use to decide how we're going to treat depression. And folks, exercise is actually one of the first-line treatment recommendations that we have. So pretty powerful for mood improvement. How about the risks? Well, being sedentary correlates with a 25% increased risk of depression in a pretty big study. So again, being sedentary isn't good. You know, again, I want to really emphasize neuroplasticity, brain growth and development. It's actually something that can continue through your entire life. So even as somebody ages, we don't want to think that that's stopped. This can keep going. You know, the only time you should really be seeing loss of brain cells is in the face of some kind of a disease. It can happen in dementia, or it's a brain isn't really used, right? So we want to actively use our brain and engage our brain. And this kind of speaks to this whole cognitive resilience idea. You know, learning new things, having new experiences can actually be quite helpful through aging and giving us some of that resilience. Segues nicely into brain challenge. So, you know, we believe, again, in FOH, that ongoing new learning can be helpful for helping you to age well. We think it could potentially help protect the brain. You know, we know in dementia that if you have a higher level of education generally through your life, your risk is lower. We think the reason for that may be just that building up that extra education gives you kind of a reserve in your brain. You know, it helps your brain operate effectively even if there is some kind of damage developing. So you don't see effects of dementia happening as soon, although again, it's still an active area of research. Now, ideally, what's probably most helpful are complex and novel activities. So it's not necessarily just doing the same Sudokus every week, but it's trying to actually do something completely new. You know, trying to learn a new language, picking up something completely different that you haven't done before is particularly helpful, probably. So, you know, this is from the Finger study. Don't worry about reading my terrible slides with too many words on them. This is basically the Finnish geriatric intervention study to prevent cognitive impairment and disability. And it's the first big randomized controlled trial showing that we might be able to prevent cognitive decline by using a multi-domain intervention. What's a multi-domain intervention? Well, these guys basically were given dietary guidance, advice on physical activity, some cognitive training and social engagement, and then really intensive monitoring of blood pressure, cholesterol, things like that. It's ongoing. It's going to be followed up again 7 years from the time it was published. And so that's positive, a little bit of evidence that we're seeing again around preventing dementia potentially. And again, you know, there's a meta to why I'm saying some of this stuff to you. So it's all quite positive, right? And as this JAMA patient page demonstrates, people can probably take active steps to reduce their risk of dementia. And this kind of goes back to CBT principles, just knowing that there's things you can do to maybe reshape your future and the way you age, that you have some power, that you have some agency in the face of this, can potentially play a large role in impacting everything else in your life. This is from a Lancet study. It was big in the news in 2017, and it was actually repeated in 2020 and was big in the news again. This is a big review, actually, not really a study, talking about these 9 lifestyle factors that are probably responsible for about 35% of the dementia burden. Okay, so if we get rid of these things, we can erase potentially 35% of that burden of dementia. And these are all lifestyle things. They're things that are potentially modifiable. So what are they? Well, we're talking about not finishing secondary education in early life. That's a risk. High blood pressure, obesity, and hearing loss in midlife. Those are risks. By the way, if you correct the hearing loss, that fixes the problem. So if you have hearing loss, get hearing aids. Smoking, depression, physical inactivity, social isolation, and diabetes in later life. They're all potentially modifiable things, right? Potentially things that we can do something about. It should be kind of empowering almost to think about this, right? 2020, the same factors were published, but they started talking about some other areas too. So excessive alcohol consumption, traumatic brain injuries, and air pollution were added into the mix as well as potentially modifiable factors that would explain about 40% of the incidence of dementia. So where are those bite comments? Okay, let's talk a bit about social connectedness now. So this is a basic human need which heavily influences brain health. It's associated with a lower risk of dementia, having more social connections. And so finding ways to continue to build and to rebuild social connections and attachment relationships over a long life is really actually quite critical to healthy aging. And this is a huge social challenge for us, isn't it? How do we stay connected in Western culture where we segregate our seniors to some extent? We institutionalize people. How do we maintain connection between people in the face of that? That's a really important thing to consider, right? We have to think about things like age-friendly communities. We have to think about intergenerational choirs, intergenerational daycares, these sorts of things which are important for maintaining connection to people. Let's take a look at the findings of the world's longest running research project on healthy aging and resilience. So now in its 75th year of follow-up, the Harvard study of adult development originally took 774, I think it was, or sorry, 724 subjects and followed them again over 75 years. And 60 of the original subjects were still alive and still participating in the study in their 90s. So nice long cohort study, good study. And what they found is that at age 50, if you had a secure relationship, this was the single most predictive variable related to your sense of well-being over 25 years after that, regardless of your background. What's a secure relationship? Well, I'm talking about the kind of person you could call in the middle of the night if you had some kind of an emergency, someone you feel close to, someone you feel you can share your soul to, be open with. These close relationships are incredibly important to maintain. We need to hold on to those. The health risks associated with loneliness are bad. You know, they're similar to smoking and obesity's health risk. When elderly folks are socially isolated, they tend to have higher risks of infection, of depression, of cognitive decline. And again, if you look at a big Swiss health survey of 20,000 people, again, similar sorts of ideas. You know, being lonely is associated with a whole bunch of negative things. And as I talk about this, I do want to give you a caveat here because this can easily be misinterpreted as kind of a tyranny of extroversion. I'm not saying to you that you need to be a social butterfly, that you need to be out every night seeing people and doing things, not that we even can be out every night now, but anyways, I'm not saying that to you. It's not about extroversion. This is about your sense of loneliness. This is about trying to fight that sense of loneliness. You know, introverts don't necessarily have these large networks of people, but being connected to other people is still very important for an introverted person. They still have their closer, smaller networks of people, and that's perfectly fine. You know, I'm not saying you're at big risk of aging poorly if you're an introvert and don't have a big network. It's more about your subjective sense of what you feel. Am I connected in the way I want to be connected? Do I have the friends and family around me who I need? You know, we need to work as a society to manage that because social connection is incredibly important. Okay, I've talked for about 30 minutes. Some of you may be getting a bit sleepy. We know from human attention that 20, 30 minutes is about as long as it should go before there's some kind of a breakup. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. Now, normally I would use online polling right now, but I'm a little terrified that GoToWebinar is going to crash my computer. So I don't want to do that. We're going to do this old school analog style. I'd like you to get a paper and a pen if you have one handy around, just something to kind of jot something down. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to think about the answers and just kind of jot down the answers. So we're going to go through 5 questions, again, related to the 5 areas that I've talked about here. And my first question I want to ask you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in terms of being socially connected to others, with 1 being not at all connected and 10 being very connected? Just go ahead and jot down a number for that. Second question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in terms of being interested in learning new things, with 1 being not at all interested and 10 being very interested? Third question. Sometimes the hardest one for people to answer, but using your own definition, how would you rate yourself in terms of successful aging, with 1 being amongst the least successful and 10 being amongst the most successful in how you've aged? Fourth question. How would you rate yourself in terms of how likely you are to seek mental health help if you needed it, with 1 being not at all likely and 10 being very likely? And finally, scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in terms of being physically active? 1 is not at all active, 10 is very active. Okay, well, congratulations, folks. You have just gone through the Health and Resiliency Questionnaire. This is step 1 that we use in the Fountain of Health toolset. And let me explain how that works to you. So the natural question here, again, is what have we done about this? You know, I've told you a bunch of science here around resiliency, around aging well. How do we turn that into something useful for people? Let's talk about the Fountain of Health intervention and how we've tried to do that. So Fountain of Health, FOH, is a national nonprofit. It was created at Dalhousie University in Halifax in 2011 and was founded by a group of geriatric specialists and cognitive behavioral therapists who wanted to take a lot of these ideas that I've just talked about and turn them into something usable, who wanted to do more health promotion, who wanted to do more positive psychiatry, wanted to help people to age well. So they looked at the science and wanted to break things down into something a bit digestible and concluded that these 5 key health behaviors that I've talked about are probably the best targets that we can use to help people to age well, based on the science. They took the tools, studied them, and then created kind of a tool set that people can use to try and make goals around these 5 areas. And we'll talk a bit about that. So again, what are the 5 prescriptions for healthy aging? Changing how we think about aging, staying socially connected, keeping physically active, engaging in lifelong learning, and taking care of our mental health. And I'm going to be hopefully preaching to the choir by now and repeating myself, but I'm going to ask you again, what non-medication treatment improves outcomes in heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, depression, anxiety, obesity, addictions, insomnia? What is the #1 most powerful promoter of neuroplasticity? What is the best single thing we could probably do for our overall health? It's exercise, right? It's huge. And again, you know, the science says probably 150 minutes a week of moderate is the ideal, but anything helps, okay? Just don't sit all the time. Get up, do something. You know, light physical activity, 15 minutes of exercise is comparable to giving up smoking. Huge, right? For a little bit of exercise. You know, I love this example. Every daily flight of stairs that you climb is equivalent to increasing your brain's gray matter to the equivalency of being about half a year younger. I mean, there's all these neat studies out there about this. We know exercise is a good thing. We know social activity is a good thing. I just spent a bunch of time talking to you about it. We know isolation can be a risk factor for dementia. We know that secure relationships help people to achieve well-being later in life. And we know that loneliness is toxic. It's like smoking, it's like obesity. And again, as a psychiatrist, I can tell you that sometimes when I do my job in adults, in older folks, whoever, I really wish that I could just prescribe a friend, that there was a way to make this a little bit easier in society for people, because I'll tell you that makes a huge difference. Social connection, incredibly important. Brain challenge, you know, we think that that cognitive activity, that brain challenge promotes neuroplasticity and that it promotes it across the lifespan. It's fertilizer also for the brain. And again, you know, I'm talking mostly about trying something new, trying something complex, something novel, you know, try to learn a new language, read something new, read a new piece of history, something that interests you, something novel. And, you know, it doesn't have to be something scholarly like a, you know, a language or reading a book. What about, you know, picking up macrame, picking up knitting, you know, picking up some artistic skill? These are all valid things to do. Okay, what are the tools I'm talking about? You know, I could talk through these different steps, but I'm going to show you a video that Fountain of Health has created. Now, bear with me. I'm going to try and make sure I can smoothly transition the slides over to do this. So give me a second.
Perhaps the greatest success story of modern medicine is the nearly doubling of our life expectancy, from 50 to 83 in the past 100 years. This medical triumph means we have nearly twice as much time to enjoy. So how do you plan to celebrate that? Should you moan about milestone birthdays or joke about expecting to lose your memory? Forget that. It's time for a new approach, a change that starts from within. Changing your perspective on aging will set you up to value and enjoy those extra years. Changing the way you think about aging might actually be one of the most important ways to stay healthy. Turns out, attitude is key to longevity. Your family genes account for only 25% of your life expectancy. Lifestyle and attitude play a much bigger role. You really can do things to take care of your brain health, and that includes changing your outlook. While there's no such thing as a fountain of youth, who needs it when the real dream is to live a long, healthy, and happy life? Our goal is to equip you with the tools to do just that. The Fountain of Health is your source for science-based steps to promote health and vitality and reduce your risk of illness or disability as you age. It's a national initiative for positive aging, backed by health professionals, researchers, and Canadians just like you. We know the Fountain of Health will inspire you to become part of a culture shift aimed at helping all Canadians age well. So are you ready to tap into your Fountain of Health? Just follow these 3 simple steps. Learn about the 5 key areas for healthy aging. They are positive thinking, staying socially active, physical exercise, lifelong learning, and taking care of your mental health. Practicing these strategies will reduce the risk of depression and dementia while maximizing your health and happiness. Answer 5 key questions to find out where you currently stand. How successfully do you feel you are aging? How socially connected to others do you feel? How physically active are you? How interested are you in learning new things? How likely would you be to seek mental health help if you needed it? Now that you know where you stand, you can set a goal in each of these 5 areas to improve your health. Keep in mind, the more realistic and specific your goal, the more likely you are to succeed. To tap into your fountain of health, complete those 3 steps with the help of our handbook. By changing how you think about aging, you can protect and invest in the most precious resource for your future, your emotional and mental well-being. Your personal fountain of health. Now that's something far too important to ever forget. The fountain of health. Healthy living, positive aging.
All right, good. I think our video transition went pretty smoothly there. You know, the thing I love about that video is in 3 minutes, it effectively does what I take an hour to do, a lot more kind of snappily and prettily, if you will. But anyways, that is the core element or the core structure of how we do this, okay? So we start with this baseline health and resiliency questionnaire that you've already done. And the purpose of it is to help you identify where you think you're doing well in life and where you'd like to work more, where you think you could set a goal. Next step is to invite a small behavior change, to take that area and to think, what could I do? How could I make a goal around making a change related to these things? Third step is you log how you're doing. You check in every day with where you're at on meeting that goal. And the fourth step is at 4 weeks, you regroup. You think, have I met the goal completely? Have I not? Are there new things I can do? And you repeat the health and resiliency questionnaire to see where you're at. And then ideally you set another goal and you keep going. So let's talk about some details here. So not all goals are created equal. And we have this concept of SMART goals as opposed to just any old goal. So a SMART goal is specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time limited. And if you think about it, following these kinds of 5 ideas can make a goal a lot more likely to be successful for you. It's easy for goals to kind of fall off the radar. I had the goal of practicing giving this talk yesterday, you know, and I even fall into this where I said I should practice it. And then by 8:30, I'd kind of like put it off, and I'd been doing other things, and I'd been cooking dinner and cleaning up and other things. And then I got around and I went through the talk again at that point. But maybe I could have said I'm going to practice it at 6:30 for 1 hour. Something like that might have made it a bit more realistic. So just want you to think a bit, and you may have the paper and pen in front of you, you may not, but you have to think of the 5 domains that I've talked about. So physical health, learning new things, mental health, positive thinking, or social engagement. What one of those domains do you think you'd be most interested in? Setting a goal in your life, tiny goal. Doesn't have to be anything huge. Maybe even jot something down to think about that you think could be a goal in one of these areas. Consider a bit, what can I do? Could I maybe go for a 10-minute walk a day? Could I call my family more? Call my family once a week. Could I pick up knitting? I don't know. Think of something. So with that kind of in mind, let's think a bit about the structure of the goals that we make. I will walk my dog for 10 minutes a day. It's a pretty good goal, isn't it? But it could be smarter, probably. You could probably add even more detail to that to make it more realistic, to make it more doable. So as you think about this goal, and you think about your own goals, ask yourself some questions. How realistic is it that I'm going to accomplish this goal over the next few weeks? Say I said I want to run a marathon. Well, I don't know if that's going to be realistic. That might be a bit much, right? Might not be possible. When was the last time I did a marathon? Well, I've never done a marathon, so maybe I'm not going to be doing that yet. How confident are you that you'll accomplish this goal? Maybe that's a bit much. Maybe my goal of going for a 15-minute run is a little more doable. Maybe that's going to be a little bit more doable for me. And then think about, when am I going to do this? When is it most feasible for me to do this? Am I going to wake up at 5 in the morning? I don't think I'm going to do that. But maybe after work, maybe in the evenings. What are some barriers I might have? How likely am I to actually do this? And as you go through this exercise and you think about SMART goals, you could turn I will walk my dog for 10 minutes a day into I will walk my dog for 10 minutes in the morning at least 3 times a week for the next 4 weeks. And I mean, it sounds pretty prescriptive, but you know, it's kind of a gift, right? Because it holds you a lot more accountable to your goal in a lot of ways. So let me give you some examples here. Walk to the mailbox 3 times a week for 1 week. Call a friend or family member once a week. Read the paper 3 mornings a week. Listen to a new radio program. CBC Ideas is incredible for lots of new thoughtful ideas. The Current, you know, all sorts of great things out there for learning new things. Attend a yoga class, write a gratitude journal. These are all really positive things. And by the way, I have handouts with a goal setting sheet, which has these ideas on them, with the health and resiliency questionnaire, and also with a whole nother sheet that's specifically oriented to COVID with modifications to how we can set some of these kinds of goals to COVID. And I think we'll be able to provide them afterwards. I'll have to touch base with Christine a bit about it, but hopefully that'll be able to get out there. But even if not, it's on the website for Fountain of Health if you want to access that material as well. So let's talk a bit about the program. So we've created paper versions of these tools. We've created the paper health and resiliency questionnaire, the goal setting, all that stuff. But we also actually have an app that we've developed at FOH. It's not the kind of app you're going to find on the App Store. It's one of those apps you have to download directly from the website, and it's a little bit tricky. It's one of those things where you load it onto the home screen. So it might require a little bit of help from Fountain of Health to get it there if you're not feeling as tech confident necessarily. But once it's there, it's wonderful. You know, it goes beyond the paper tools. You have all of that stuff automatically online, but it also has this readiness assessment each day to check in with you on how ready you feel to actually work on your goal. And if you're not feeling ready, then there's these wonderful kind of encouragements and other things you can back up into to help. And there's also lots of other great links, which I really love. So things like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is a wonderful tool for people who can't sleep, basic beginner meditation, basic nutrition, basic information on stress management, anxiety, relaxation techniques. It's good stuff. So I'll whirlwind you through a little bit of what it looks like. So this is the landing page here. This is what the health and resiliency questionnaire looks like in the app next to the paper tool that I sent there. So again, this would be step 1 of the process, be going through this. Step 2 of the process is thinking of a SMART goal, inviting a small behavior change that you can do in your life. And in the app, that kind of looks like this. So it can guide you through some of the goal setting work. This is the landing page for the physical activity part. Okay, so lots of good suggestions there on different types of exercise goals that people can make. And again, beside it is the paper version, which I'm hoping will also get sent out to you folks, so you can have access to that. Now, online has nice goal tracking software, so you can click off how ready you feel on an individual day to go after one of these goals and click off when you've been successful. This is the encouragement section, so lots of video and audio of different encouragements you can listen to. Step 3 is just tracking your progress. And then finally, at 4 weeks, looking at where you've gone, considering if there have been any barriers and repeating with a new goal. So this is the 4-week checkout here. So it's wonderful. It's completely free, by the way. We're a nonprofit. We don't charge users for this stuff. If you want to donate to the organization, you can, but you don't have to. This is a nonprofit free tool that you can use if you find it helpful for setting goals. And I guess it kind of raises the question, you know, as physicians, clinicians, anyone, you know, treating folks, what do you think are kind of some of the barriers to doing this kind of work? Why don't people do more health promotion? Well, I can tell you the single most important barrier, because all of us know this is important, is time, right? I mean, GPs have these 15-minute slots. Like, unfortunately, the structure is built in such a way that they just don't have a lot of time for doing it, unfortunately. And you know, it's kind of similar when it comes to ourselves doing these things for self-care and for our own health promotion. People feel too busy. They feel too overwhelmed to add this stuff to their busy lives. And what I'll emphasize to you is that it's pretty fast to do this, right? You know, a doctor can whip through something like this with someone in a few minutes in an appointment, and we ourselves can do this pretty quickly. You know, it's a nice way to automate these little changes. And again, guys, I'm emphasizing little. You know, I think there's actually a lot of merit to very simple, almost impossible not to meet goals. Benefits to doing that sort of stuff. Okay, so does this work? Well, the science has been done. It was fairly promising in early clinical trials. So the system was tested in about 500 participants in Nova Scotia. An average of 80% of them who used the tools at least partially, completely, or even exceeded their health goal over a 4 and 8 week period. And so we went larger. Last year, we took it nationwide, taught over 2,000 clinicians about the toolbox, and ultimately got results from, I think, 380 clients who used the paper tools and then 581 who used our app. And again, really great results. So 85% of people using the paper tools and 80% of the app users experienced at least some change in their sense of well-being by doing this kind of thing. 89 to 90% respectively at least partially completed some of their goals. So it's useful, right? It helps people engage in this. So I want to leave you with this idea here around the 1 degree effect. In this global pause from COVID-19, we have an opportunity to really reflect on our lives and to reflect on where we're headed and adjust our course. The 1 degree effect is the cumulative gap between where you are headed and where you want to be. It's not necessarily the result of really significant or even kind of conscious decisions, but rather it's the impact of veering very slightly off course over a long period of time. The easiest way to understand the impact of the 1 degree effect is to think about an airplane's flight path. So if a plane in San Francisco is headed to Baltimore, if it corrects by 1 degree, it would go 1 mile in a different course for every 60 miles flown. And in the end, it ends up 43 miles away in Washington, DC. And so thinking about this, I ask you, where do you want to be in your life when the pandemic is over? What decisions can you make now, little decisions, that will improve your destination in years from now? Think about it. Okay, so again, this is the website for the Fountain of Health. Free tools, welcome to use them if you're interested. Thank you all so much for your attention. I hope you all can be well and prosper as much as possible moving through these difficult times. I have a couple minutes to sit around for some questions. Then I actually have to run off to meet with a patient. But again, if there are questions that come up that we're not able to make time for, I think I can always respond by email later too. So thank you all so much.
Dr. Blackburn, thank you so much. I think you've made us all feel optimistic, and we even had a great start on learning new things today. So we're already on a good path forward. So it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for inspiring us. So so Christine, I think that maybe there's a couple of minutes left. We could have a couple of questions if people have put them into the chat box. Christine?
Oh, I do see one here.
Oh, good.
Were the 5 questions included on the provincial COVID questionnaire?
That's actually a really interesting question. I don't know. I think they could be, right? I mean, the COVID is just such an incredible time for us, such an awful time too, in terms of, we've dealt with, of course, the medical elements of this. We've dealt with the physical consequences. And I didn't include this slide. I thought about including it, but there really is this whole concept of a mental health wave that comes as a result of this as well too. And I think a lot of us working in mental health are certainly seeing, the impacts from COVID. It's affecting everyone in certain ways. And again, even as a geriatric psychiatrist as well too, just the limitations placed on long-term care, where families aren't able to visit people, where our elders are, isolated. It's really hard for folks. And so, it's kind of a good point, even in terms of thinking about how, from a public health perspective, from a province perspective, or global perspective even, do we build this sense of resilience in people in the face of what has been a giant shared trauma to everybody? So
Dr. Blackburn, thank you so much for your time today. We're so grateful for everything you've brought to us. And as people can provide questions, right, Christine, and then we'll try and get back to you if you've left some questions in the chat box. So everyone, thank you so much for participating in the virtual dialogue on aging presentation. And there will be a recording, as Christine's mentioned, and that'll be available on the Dialogue on Aging public presentation website soon. Christine will let us know. And we're really looking forward to next month on the November the 18th, where we're going to be able to meet Dr. Glenn Landry, speaking about sleep health in the time of COVID. So it's a nice bookend to your presentation, Dr. Blackburn. So that the Alzheimer's Society of BC is so pleased to be a partner with Providence Health for this series, and we're grateful for all of you to participating. Thank you so much, and Christine and Mary Lou for so elegantly jumping in and supporting me while I had my tech difficulties. But thanks everyone so much. See you next month, November the 18th. Bye-bye.